It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. A different show this week. We're kicking off the new year with a show about the future. Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, joins us. He's actually firmly mired in the Middle Ages, but with an eye toward the future. And futurist Amy Webb, she's just written a book about synthetic biology. A look at the future, plus a little news from CES coming up next on Twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 857, recorded Sunday, January 9th, 2022. New World Disorder. This episode of This Week in Tech is brought to you by Our Crowd. Our Crowd helps accredited investors invest early in pre-IPO companies alongside professional venture capitalists. Join the fastest growing venture capital investment community at ourcrowd.com/twit. And by Linode. Develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier. Get $100 in credit when you visit linode.com/twit. And by Wealthfront. To start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed for free for life, go to wealthfront.com/twit. And by BetterHelp. Join over 1 million people who've taken charge of their mental health. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/twit. It's time for Twit This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. Although this week, we're going to cover next year's tech news. Joining us today, our very own futurist. We always love having her on. Amy Webb from the Future Today Institute, CEO there, and also a genius in every way. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Leo.
Good to see you. Your new book is just weeks away. Are you excited?
I cannot wait for people to read this. Not just because I spent years working on this, and I think it's the most important. This is the most important technology is biology, and I can't wait for people to read what we've found.
Your timing is actually really good because we are very much aware of now how important biology is to life on Earth. And so I think it couldn't be better timing. I can't wait to read about this. And you do cover mRNA and synthetic biology and all sorts of stuff. I can't wait. It's going to come just in time for Valentine's Day. So Lisa,
it is. It's my weird present to the world.
Lisa knows
them, I love you.
Now what she's going to get for Valentine's Day. Also with us, and I'm really pleased because he took his life into his own hands to go to CES this week. Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit. Hey, Robert.
If she's a futurist, I guess that I'm a pastist. Does that work?
Yeah, it's actually kind of appropriate. We had planned a much larger show, but the way the world is, that a number of people have canceled on us, and so it is actually a much more intimate show, which actually I don't mind. In fact, honestly, if I had to do just the two of you for the rest of my life, I would be very, very happy with it. You're two of my favorite people. But it is in a way kind of appropriate. Amy is a futurist. She's looking ahead. You are a priest in the oldest church in the West. Some would say a medieval theology. Although, as we know, Father Robert is far from a medievalist. But I think, your perspective, perhaps. Actually, Amy, you wanted to kick this off, so I'm going to let you do this. It is going to be a show about the future. We had hoped to have a sci-fi author and some other people on to kind of give us some extra kind of insight into that. So we had some cancellations. But I think we could still talk about this. We'll also talk about the week's tech news and CES, too. There's plenty to talk about this week. But why don't you kick things off? Because it was your idea. I blame you. It was your idea. You thought it would be fun, and I thought so, too, to do a show about not just today's technology, but tomorrow's.
Yeah. So maybe just by way of a little bit of level setting. So my So I'm a futurist. I'm a quantitative futurist. My goal professionally is to make my job super boring so that nobody lights up when I say what I do. Anyway, for real.
You have failed.
I've failed so far. But I want to not be the most interesting person at the cocktail party. I want people to look at me and be like, yeah, you're like an accountant, just in a different way. So I thought it would be useful just really quickly to have everybody for us to sort of just level set.
People think of futurists as like palm readers or as gypsies, telling the future.
Well, yeah.
You're not
and
that.
There's a reason. No. There's a reason for that. But there's a cognitive reason why we care about the future. Because if you stop and think about it, we live in the moment. So why should we think about the future? And the answer has to do with what's called the Zygarnic Effect. So there's a Soviet psychologist named Bluma Zygarnik, who was doing a bunch of research and found that, people don't really like it when we don't, finish, when we don't get to completion. And we hate that lack of completion so much that we invent what-if scenarios.
But it's kind of part of life. You don't make it to the end.
That's right.
You're going to die in the middle of the story no matter what.
Right, but yes, but in the interim, our brain is just continuously making up. It's puzzles. We're just constantly problem solving and solving puzzles. So, the Oracle of Delphi, for those of you who remember your Greek mythology in high school and college, so at that point, Delphi is at the center of the world. There was a temple there, and basically there was a priestess, an oracle who would answer questions. And some of this happened through divination, which is this ancient practice of just looking at different lots. And sort of the idea of chance, especially statistically, is a very recent invention, because the absence of chance was always intervention by God. So, and basically, I think that divination was always a way of avoiding critical thinking about the future and sitting with that it's very uncomfortable to sit with the lack of completion. So anyhow, as you go on through the years, what starts off as divination ends up in the 4th century with St. Augustine questioning whether or not there is such a thing as free will or God's predetermination. And then Descartes, who's looking at free will again, and forms the foundation of AI, all the way up to Jules Verne, who's sort of writing pre-science fiction, to H.G. Wells, who I know everybody knows, but probably his most important work was not The Time Machine. It was this paper that he wrote called The Anticipations of the Reaction of Mechanical Scientific Progress Upon Human Life and Thought.
Oh, who could ever forget that?
Who could ever forget it?
It's a page turner.
Well, basically what he was saying was, because he was a journalist, he did something he called predictive writing, but he was trying to say that this sort of what-if scenario, the word scenario didn't exist yet, but what if? These are important questions to ask, and we can't just assume that fate is in charge of everything. If we want to make our own destinies, we have to do something about it. So he did. And through this process, which he was trying to get into universities, he wanted people to study it the way they studied math. He imagined a national highway system, automated machines that he thought at that point would replace what was the servant class. He thought of prefab houses. He thought at some point the collapse of capitalism would come. And later on, unfortunately, as tends to happen, he got into eugenics. So his utopian future was, so that happens. But anyhow, then you get to World War II, and you get Nicholas Rechler and Olaf Helmer, who use something called the Delphi method, which is a structured way of having conversations to collect data. Again, thinking about what if. Herman Kahn, who I trace my origin to, he took a turn and built on what they did, but this time used game theory, which is what I did academically, and developed probabilistic outcomes. And so it was Kahn who first used the word scenario. He was having lunch with a friend of his who worked in Hollywood. It's World War II. He's trying to get military officials to think very, very critically about what would be the aftermath of dropping a bomb on Japan. And he couldn't get them to pay attention. And he kept telling people, just sending, numbers aren't, it doesn't mean anything. And he was actually trying to prevent this from happening. So he wrote what became On Thermonuclear War. Anyhow, that takes us up to the modern era. So you've got Pierre Vac, who's this crazy Frenchman, super into Eastern religions, becomes a pivotal executive at Royal Dutch Shell because he figures out how to predict oil shocks and makes the business case for foresight. Peter Schwartz, and a bunch of people after them sort of become this diaspora. And now, today, we've got people like me. So I'm trained, and it's not divination anymore or speculation, but it is it's still sitting with uncertainty. And I would say now that there's a little bit of a gap. There's theorists; these are academics who are pretty closed off, and they don't really care about practical applications. And then there's enthusiasts. They are super interested in the future, but don't necessarily have training. And I think there's a in-between space that's useful, that's necessary for society, because our future depends on this type of work, I think.
And in a way, it's good to precondition people to say, look, we're not Delphic oracles. We're not going to predict what's going to happen, because that's almost impossible. This was making the rounds on Reddit last week from the New York Herald magazine of 1922, what the world will be like in 100 years. And while there's a lot of interesting stuff in here, it's of course a lot of mistakes as well, including they said we won't be cooking anymore. In fact, private dwellings we're going to disappear because we're all going to live in cooperative housings with dining halls. But some of it was actually pretty accurate. That's not what you do. You're not trying to say what the world's going to look like in 21, 22.
No. Now, that being said, my job is to explore alternative futures. So it's not about prediction. It's about preparation. So a lot of times so I have a big team that I work with. A lot of times we're going to companies, the executives at companies, and saying, what if your entire supply chain is not based anymore in China? What if it's based somewhere else? What would be the potential outcomes? Or, hey, there's this synthetic biology thing on the very near term horizon. What if the outcome of this is that humans live ultra long lives? That's good. On the one hand, it's actually really bad for sports, for professional sports leagues.
What? Why?
Why? Because you wind up with games. I mean, I'm not like super into sports, but I'm super into baseball. And you could make the argument that the star players who are also the most expensive never retire. And
that would be bad.
It would be bad. It would make the game super boring, but it would also break the financial models.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
So anyhow,
you need turnover for professional sports to survive.
You also need turnover just in general in government,
in life.
I mean,
yes,
you could have the current Supreme Court gets to be on the court for life. If life now means 120 years, instead of 80 years, does that become a problem? I think it probably does.
Yeah, it's already too old, as is the Congress. Yeah.
So anyhow, we don't make predictions, but we do look at, again, using not speculation, but like data. What are the possible outcomes? What are the next order impacts? And the point of this sometimes is to inspire and delight, but what I'm hoping is that it reduces uncertainty so we can make smarter decisions, and also so that it inserts us into that future. My concern is that with politics and COVID and everything else, people are sort of nowists and also absolutists. And I think our future demands a sense of awe and wonder. Not complacency or disillusionment, but leaning into that uncertainty with the hope that we can learn and we don't have all the answers, and we're willing to make better decisions.
By the way, her company's, Amy's company, the Future Today Institute, does make available its tech trends report. You've been doing this for 14 years. I have a rare print version of this, 13, because you started 0 volumes. Yeah. But this is also online for everybody to see at futuretodayinstitute.com/trends. Just out of curiosity, you ever go back to year one and see how you did?
Yeah. So after that preamble about this not being predictive and I can't possibly know the exact future, we have a 97% accuracy rate.
Okay, nice. But that's partly because you're not trying to say this will happen, but talking about trends and things like that.
Right. Now, you can use data to calculate trajectories. So we can determine, for example, machine learning will be on this trajectory, and we think that the time horizons look like X, right? The exact year doesn't matter. The exact inflection point doesn't matter as much. It's sort of backwards engineering to the present, what that could mean at different points.
Right.
So I've been wrong on a few things. NFC was one of them. I misread some patents, and
the near field communications chips in the back of phones that you tap against things. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so did you say they were going to be big or not?
Big in iPhone specifically, and we just got the model.
You know what? We thought so too. We thought now that iPhone has finally adopted NFC technology, because they were really slow, this is going to make it take off, and it's quite the opposite. It has not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also took a lot longer for QR codes, which we all, it took COVID for QR codes.
Well, it's interesting. QR codes have taken off. It may be because of the pandemic, but yes, I'm using them much more than ever before.
Yeah.
And I thought there's no way that's going to take off. That's nuts.
Well, I had been in Japan anyhow, it doesn't matter. I thought 10 years ago that was going to start to create sort of a spatial hyperlinking, sort of being able to
in the real
be in
world.
Different places.
Yeah, hyperlink the real world. Yeah.
And that did happen in China and in Asia. It just didn't take off in the U.S. And that wasn't a huge deal, but a lot of the times the work that we're doing leads to multi-billion-dollar investments or big decisions. So we need to do this with some thought.
We do something in my neck of the woods that we call chaining, and there's two sides of it. The chain of decisions is what you would typically think of when you are looking at the future. These are the steps that I want to take in order to put my organization where I think it needs to be. But then along with any chain of decisions, we also look at chain of consequences. And chain of consequences is more like what Amy is talking about, where we actually start asking the questions of the minutia. Well, if X, Y, and Z happens, what are the other possible consequences from X, Y, and Z happening? Rather than just looking at, I want X, Y, and Z to happen because it allows me to move to step 2 or step 3 or
I
step
think
4.
the Jesuits are unusual, in fact, in their devotion to these kinds of methodologies and rigorous thinking. I think it's more because you guys are trying to make thought rigorous and have always been, it seems to me, inclined that way.
That's part of our organizational DNA. I mean, that's one of the things that set us aside, where we were willing to make something, a pronouncement that seemed completely out of place, brash, heretical to some, but then it turned out to be true. And the reason why it turned out to be true is not because, well, our guys had a great finger on the pulse of the future. It was because we actually sat in a room and went back and forth with a lot of screaming. And someone finally said, look, if this happens, then there are 4 other possibilities that we need to at least prepare for.
You're like the Bene Gesserits.
Yes, and which, by the way, they were based on Jesuits.
I think they were. I had that feeling. Well, and this is interesting because you work for an organization that is among the oldest organizations, probably is the oldest organization still extant. I mean, almost 2,000 years of continuous history. So that gives you a certain standing in all of this that is different than the rest of us who at most are looking at a century ahead.
But let's just say some of those decisions have not been great.
They haven't all worked out. I understand.
They haven't worked out. I'll leave it there.
And the Jesuits themselves are really only 500 years old. So you're really a young
We're
organization.
youngins.
Yeah.
Franciscans look at us and just go like, who are you again? Sorry.
Well, okay, we're going to actually get into this in a little bit more detail. We'll talk about CES too, because you were there, and I do want to absolutely talk about it. And actually, the kind of predictions of the future we do at TWiT is more like, will there be a CES next year, than anything much more significant than that. And by the way, we still get those wrong almost all the time. I thought CES was long gone. It seems not to have disappeared entirely anyway, even though it's it's dwindling. We've got just a wonderful panel of people today. I'm so glad to have Amy Webb here from Futures Today Institute, Father Robert Balacer. You're in Vegas right now.
I am in Vegas.
Nice.
I'm here for my last PCR to finish up, and then I'm heading back to San Francisco, then back to Rome.
Oh, okay. Did you come to the U.S. just for this, or you were visiting and other things
No.
too? Okay.
So about once a year, I get about a month off, and I use it to visit family. And it's 2 weeks with my sister, 2 weeks with my parents, and CES just happened to fall in that.
And your parents happen to live in Las Vegas, which makes that even more convenient.
Yeah, much easier.
That's an amazing coincidence. Who would have thought
weird,
that?
Right? Okay, it's not a coincidence. Way back in the day, when I was doing all these conferences, I may have purchased a house that they then moved into when they retired.
Okay. A little plan behind that. We're going to take a little break. And I want to talk about one of our sponsors right now that actually is exactly around this topic, planning for your future. I know that many of the people who watch this show are investors. If you are somebody who is looking to find the next big thing to invest in, you should know about Our Crowd. Our Crowd is a venture capital firm that analyzes companies across the entire global private market. Now, these are not companies that have yet been discovered. They're looking for the next big thing. And because they are a large VC firm, they have really access to what they call deal flow. They really can see what's going on in areas that are about to break out, like personalized medicine, cybersecurity, robotics, quantum computing. In state-of-the-art labs and startup garages and anywhere in between, Our Crowd is identifying innovators. They make it possible for you to invest when the growth potential is the greatest, early on. Our Crowd is the fastest growing venture capital investment community. In order to participate now, I should say, first of all, it costs you nothing to go to Our Crowd and join up. That's free. But at that point, you might have the opportunity to invest. But I have to explain first, you have to be an accredited investor. That's a legal term. Every country has different standards for what an accredited investor is. It usually has to do with net income and expertise and so forth, because this is not something you would do with your first dollar. This is something you would do if you've been wise, you've put aside money, you've got your savings plan, your retirement plan, but you're looking for another area to invest in that is exciting, that is interesting, and has a lot of growth potential. 21 of their portfolio companies are unicorns. But this is what's cool. They weren't unicorns when they got in. That's what's so important. Many of Our Crowd's members have benefited from the over 40 IPOs and sale exits of portfolio companies. Again, another reason you want to get in early. If you're an accredited investor, you can participate in single company deals with Our Crowd for as little as $10,000. You don't have to have millions to invest. You can get in the funds. They have some funds as well. You can get in for those as little as $50,000. But I should tell you, you have to be an accredited investor, and a minimum of $10,000 is required to invest. Investment terms are going to vary depending on what you invest in. You can get more information when you go to the site. The key is you're going to put the country that you live in into the site, and they will tell you what the rules are. I'll give you an example, though, of the kind of interesting startups Our Crowd already can give you access to. For instance, you can invest in Blue Tree. Blue Tree is in the food tech market. And they have technology that Our Crowd's investors believe could revolutionize this $1 billion plus total addressable food tech market. They've developed a process, and I think this is really cool, to significantly reduce the sugar in any natural liquid, which, of course, makes it healthier, lowers health risks, but without changing the taste. Blue Tree has already signed a 5-year, 100 million liter contract with an industry leader. They're on their way. This is the kind of interesting new stuff you can get involved in investing today at Our Crowd. So if you're interested, if maybe in Blue Tree or one of their other portfolio companies, go to OURCROWD, ourcrowd.com/twit. Costs you nothing to join. That'll give you access to the research, the information. Then you can make a decision about whether you want to get involved. Our Crowd, OURCROWD.com/twit. /twit. Join the fastest growing venture capital investment community. I love this because this has traditionally not been something we normal people can get involved in. You know, this is something you gotta know people in Sand Hill Road to get involved in. Now anybody can. OurCrowd.com/twit. And we thank them so much for their support of This Week in Tech. We'd wanted to have Kevin Rose on the show to talk about finance. The world is changing absolutely thanks to crypto, thanks to NFTs, thanks to DeFi, decentralized finance. I read a really interesting article this morning by Moxie Marlinspike, who I have a lot of respect for. He is the guy who came up with Signal. He's a brilliant technologist, but he also had some very interesting points to make about Web3. So let's start off talking about crypto, the web, and in particularly Web3. The idea, at least the proponents of Web3 say the idea is a decentralized World Wide Web that is run on blockchain, not by a big platform company. I've seen people kind of disagree with that, including Moxie, who says essentially, you know, there's a fundamental problem with a decentralized platform. It just will not innovate as fast as a centralized platform. So all the innovation happens with the platforms. He says you're having the same problem with Web3. Amy, what do you and your people think about the future of Web3? Have you spent any time talking about that yet?
Yeah. So heading into this year, so our big annual report comes out at South by Southwest in March every year, and one of the key themes is decentralization. You know, I have a real problem with the way that I hear it being described, not from a technical or a protocol point of view, but from sort of the point of view of what it means. So if you go back, you know, the Web 1.0 world, post academia as it was becoming commercialized, described the standards, right, and the protocols to enable what was essentially one-to-many distribution. So you've got a centralized hub for content or data or whatever it might be, and it sort of goes out to many people. You know, Web 2.0 was about interoperability, openness, and I think if you go back, you know, decentralization was probably at the top of that list too, because BitTorrent was a part of that. You know, a lot of the places where I used to scrape music was part of that ecosystem. JSON was a part of that. You know, JSTOR, like there are all of these things that were part of that ecosystem prior to Facebook. You know, the types of companies today that we argue are too consolidated and have too much power. And even the people who built a lot of the Web 2.0, I used to go to Web 2.0 Summit 1.5 billion years ago. You know, and Web 2.0 at the time was the precursor to Twitter, the precursor to Facebook and some of these other things. So you had Odeo, you had Flickr, you had WordPress, you had 6apart, right? But over time, you wind up with consolidation. So it's kind of not surprising that yet again, we're talking about decentralization, and the technology is certainly more sophisticated. But in almost every other circumstance, anytime you look at an innovation cycle and companies developing new products, services, protocols, standards, whatever it might be, you wind up with consolidation. So I know everybody's very excited about the prospect of Web3, which I think generally speaking stands for new sets of protocols, you know, using Ethereum or using new types of smart contracts, tokens, right? A lot of this runs by tokens and decentralized autonomous organizations and things like that. But at some point, you still have to have a group of people who are building out these systems, who are making decisions. And at the moment, it tends to be the same group of people. It's pretty homogenous. So I'm excited about some of the technology, certainly. And I think that there are practical applications, like it's going to give artists more control to earn revenue, you know, in a Web 3.0 world. I don't know if Spotify has to exist anymore, stuff like that. But if what everybody's super excited about is decentralization, I think it's worthwhile to go back in time and look at go back to 2004 and some of the public conversations around decentralization, and at the very earliest days of the commercial web. I mean, these conversations pop up over and over again, and I just worry that it's the same basic group of people making decisions for everybody, but without the worldview of everybody.
I think you nailed it. I often say, just like you, the technologies are interesting, but the actual implementations seem like more of the same. Jack Dorsey tweeted a couple of weeks ago, you don't own Web3. The VCs and their LPs, their limited partners do. It will never escape their incentives. It's ultimately a centralized entity with a different label. And in fact, that's exactly what Moxie Marlinspike was pointing out, not out of Jack's implying some sort of kind of maliciousness, but Moxie's saying it's just the way, it's the nature of things that these things end up becoming centralized because that's where all the innovation happens. And it ends up being the platforms control it. He made an NFT. He thought this would be kind of interesting. He wanted to learn more about NFTs. So Moxie, who's a very talented coder, created an NFT that changes based on who's looking at it. You know, NFTs don't in any way guarantee that image is going to be any particular way. You might buy an NFT of the Mona Lisa, but since you don't actually have the Mona Lisa in your hand, it's just a website, that can change. So he created it. If you look at his NFT on OpenSea, it looks one way. This NFT on the left, if you looked on a Rarible, it looks this way. And if you looked at it in your wallet, it would look like a poop emoji. And his point is that many of the highest priced NFTs could turn into poop emojis at any time. He just made it explicit. But what was even more interesting is after a few days of doing this, his NFT was removed from OpenSea, which is the NFT marketplace. Now, it wasn't living on OpenSea, but because OpenSea took it down, it no longer appeared anywhere, including his crypto wallet, because it isn't decentralized. It turns out everybody's doing a JSON query to OpenSea to see what that NFT is, and if OpenSea doesn't list it, it doesn't exist. So he really demonstrated in a very clear way. He says it means if your NFT is removed from OpenSea, it disappears from your wallet. It doesn't functionally matter that my NFT is indelibly on the blockchain somewhere because the wallet and increasingly everything else in the ecosystem is just using the OpenSea API to display it. So it's a myth, in other words, that it's a decentralized thing. Platforms inevitably, just the nature of the beast. And I think he's not saying this is a bad thing. It's just something you should be aware of. And you know, it isn't what it promises to be. Yeah.
Look, when you're talking about Web3, when you're talking about the blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs, you're essentially running into the same problem. The idea of decentralization is fantastic.
Wonderful.
And the promise is there. It looks like it would work except for one thing. There's one component that kills everything, and that is the reward component. The reward for running a node, the reward for allowing your resources to be used by a web application, the reward for allowing your work to be represented in this ecosystem has to be present. And when you start talking about reward, now you have to get into either proof of stake or proof of work. And now we got the inefficiencies and the bureaucracies that we were trying to get rid of in the first place.
Yeah.
In other words, the idea of blockchain, the idea of Web3 is great, but the implementation destroys what the original idea was. And now you've got crypto bros who are trying to shine over that last part. They're saying, well, don't worry about it. Don't it's the next technology is going to fix for that. But how do you fix for fundamental greed and the need to have some sort of authoritative source to tell you what is and is not legitimate? And unfortunately, that is not in the protocol. That's not in the technology. That's a fundamental flaw of human nature.
Yeah, I agree.
So, right. So there's an economic argument, picking up what Padre just said. You know, Adam, a lot of the people who are fierce proponents of Web3 using decentralization as the best possible way forward for humanity through protocols and tech and everything else, they will in the same breath often quote Adam Smith, or they'll allude to arguments by Smith, you know, and sort of the invisible hand of the free market system improves things for everybody. except that there are always people in charge. So there's no such thing anywhere as a truly democratized, flat system without any centralization whatsoever. And we actually already saw the problems play out in real time. So do you guys remember Constitution DAO? This happened a couple weeks ago.
They raised $40 million to buy a copy 44 to buy a copy of the U.S. Constitution. They lost out to a hedge fund magnate. The guy, by the way, the guy, interestingly, who saved Robinhood after the stonk scandal of GameStop. But anyway, yes.
Well, but here's why this matters. So, I mean, it's a ridiculous story. A bunch of people met up on Twitter and they form a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. They use the very tools that you just heard Padre talk about. And they remarkably raise an enormous sum of money.
Yeah.
Huge amount of money. And for a very long time, it was looking as though this group of people was probably going to win. And if they won if they won that Constitution at auction, it was one of the original 13 copies, only one of 2 that's in private circulation. They had a right to do anything they wanted with it. They could donate it to a museum, or they could have folded it into a paper airplane and flown it into a bonfire.
Tore it into as many pieces as there were DAO contributors and given each one of them a tiny little bit.
Right. Now, here's
None of which
problem.
they planned to do, we should point out.
No. Okay. So the issue is they lost. Yeah. They lost, mercifully, right? They lost the auction, but now they're sitting on top of $44 million, and a whole bunch of people want that money back. So now you've got, so this sort of illustrates the central problem. The problem is
it's
that
even more than that, because the gas fees of refunding it end up being you get nothing back. In fact, it could cost you money to get your money back.
Right, but this has to do with accountability. And one of the arguments that I hear made all the time is, but there's the immutable ledger, right? And that assures accountability. And the answer is yes, in certain circumstances. But the practical realities of how we relate to each other as humans and what our expectations are butt up against the technology itself. So,
well, and as Moxie pointed out, yeah, it may exist on the blockchain, but if you need to go through an API with a centralized platform to see what's on the blockchain, it mocks nix. You can't see it. And by the way, NFTs are too big to live on the blockchain. All that lives there is a reference to another place, which also may not exist or turn into a
and even and even Ethereum, and the token system. I mean, these are still open protocols in as much as TCP/IP and HTTPS. And, we have series of protocols, but things have to get built on top of them. And those things typically require some type of leadership structure. So
that's Moxie's point. Platforms will always win out in this. Now, I had invited Kevin Rose because I knew this was a part of the conversation we were going to have. I'm sorry that he couldn't make it today because he is very bullish on all of this, and I'm sure that he would have a defense of it. But I have to say, and I keep looking into this, and I look to people like Moxie, Jack Dorsey, there did seem to be a common idea that perhaps this isn't the miracle that we were hoping it would be. But then that leads to the question, is the internet always going to be just dominated by big platforms, Amy?
I think the internet's always going to be dominated by a handful of people who are hyper-connected and make a lot of decisions that wield great influence.
It's just the way it is.
I heard Chris Dixon and Naval on a Tim Ferriss podcast that must have aired a couple days ago. They were talking about, Chris Dixon is majored in philosophy. I think he was on a PhD track for philosophy, and he's a wonderful writer. He's a great communicator. Listening to the two of them talk, it's dazzling. It sounds amazing.
Well, I should also point out he's also a partner at A16Z.
Right.
Which is the primary promoter of Web3.
Right. And that's my point. There is another way to look at this. And again, I believe that our future demands a sense of awe and wonder. And I don't mean to sound super jaded, but isn't it possible that this is just an evolution of technology, an important one, but it isn't as fundamental, right? And maybe we have an opportunity here to fix some of what went wrong the last time, to make things more inclusive, Padre mentioned finance bros. He's right. There are women who are in this space, but you never hear from them. There are people of color who are doing great things. You never hear from them. So if the whole point here is, inclusivity and decentralization and for the people, then it's got to be more than a handful of people making all these decisions.
What about things like micro lending? There are other movements in finance to make it more equitable. Do you see those as being important in the future?
Well, there's a lot of that happening, especially in Africa.
Right.
A lot of
where you don't have a big entrenched incumbent banking system. So you can have things like M-Pesa, online payment systems, stuff that is very different and new. Is that the future?
Well, I think the place where this plays out better, it's regionally, first of all. There's a reason that M-Pesa took off in Africa, and it probably wouldn't take off in Chicago. But decentralization, so DeFi, decentralized finance, countries like China issuing the e-yuan, which is the digital version of their currency, changing, banking. We do a ton of work in the banking and private equity and just financial sector, and it's so antiquated. There's been no real push to innovate in any significant way. So this definitely changes things and potentially levels the playing field a little bit, especially when you talk about digital identity and just making it easier for people who are unbanked to participate in the economy on the one hand. Insurance is another place where we do a lot of work, and the amount of paper forms that most people still have to fill out, it's 2022, you shouldn't have to write stuff on paper.
Yeah.
Or mortgages. So I think making things just easier, giving people better access, reducing a lot of middleware, if middleware are humans. You shouldn't have to, it's insane to buy a house in this country.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely insane. The number of people that are involved. And I'm not trying to put people out of work, but I'm also trying to be just practical. They're in the smart contract space and finance space and decentralizing space. And it also provides opportunities to countries like Venezuela, whose currencies become super devalued. But it's also a potential problem for the United States because if countries start moving into stable coins, the dollar doesn't matter as much anymore. So my point is this is more than NFTs.
Oh, and, hugely more.
Yeah, and it's important, but it's also I don't know. I get real irritated / nervous when I hear people talking about this new tech utopia of Web3, which is, I think, misguided.
Utopia turns into dystopia with the blink of an eye, unfortunately.
It sure can.
In 1922,
the best place to see that is the rise of all the altcoins. Every single altcoin.
Says the guy who invested heavily in Doge.
But that was for fun. I did it out of giggles. I didn't think people were actually going to do it seriously. Oh, no. But every single
you didn't have
altcoin,
to invest. You just set up a miner.
Yeah, I just set up a miner. But all of them have come about because people realized there was something wrong with the previous cryptocurrency that they were bullish on. And then they moved to the next one. And it turned out, it's exactly the same. Well, let's move to the next one. It's almost the definition of insanity. If we move to enough cryptocurrencies, enough blockchains that are exactly the same as the last one.
How about Shiba Inu? Right, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
How about if anybody pays attention to soccer, which I don't, but Lionel Messi, who's arguably one of the world's greatest. Right?
Yeah, baby.
Right. So he left FC Barcelona, which was a huge, big deal, for Paris Saint-Germain, which apparently is not as good of a team. Again, I totally don't pay attention to soccer. But part of his comp package was in tokens.
Yeah.
And there are a handful of soccer clubs that are making hundreds of millions of dollars by issuing fan tokens, which are kind of like minority shares of the team, but it has real world financial consequences for the players. So it's Dogecoin is stupid. However, all of these altcoins and tokens are having real world financial repercussions.
The new mayor of New York City is taking his first 3 paychecks in Bitcoin.
Let's not talk about
at least once a month. At least once a month I get an email, a phone call, or a visit from someone on the other side of the wall who has been pitched something. A new company has come to them and said, well, we want to create a Vatican coin or a Francis coin.
Oh, my God.
I have to explain it to them. Well, because, look, if they can get the Catholic Church to say this is our coin, it automatically has a pump and dump potential that is beyond anything you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's what I explained to them. I said, look, yes, it would make a ridiculous amount of money and it would completely destroy your reputation. So claim you don't do that.
And the reputation of the church, I might add. In 1922, 100 years ago, banks built giant marble edifices to show that they were financially stable, that you could trust them, you could put your money in their big old safe in the basement. Here in Petaluma, we have 3 old bank buildings that are vacant or occupied by antique stores because that doesn't exist anymore. What do financial institutions do today to let us know it's safe? I just the other day I had to buy. I helped my daughter buy renter's insurance. The apartment building she moved into required it. I went to Lemonade, which is an online insurance broker. Online, it took me 3 minutes to sign her up for renter's insurance. It scared me. I wanted to go to a big bank with lots of forms. Sometimes it's too easy, right?
Well, again, I think it's the expectation versus reality. And so a lot of these I think the most interesting story in decentralization has to do with a sort of emerging new world disorder. Things are being disordered, right? And so
that's
you're right.
The scariest time of all, the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah. Well, so again, this has cognitively we are challenged by this, and so trust is absolutely paramount, especially in financial services. However, these institutions are vulnerable to disruption because they've been refusing to change for so long.
Good point.
I mean, right? From banking to insurance to, forgive me, Father, for my sin in saying this too, but religion,
that's true. Yes.
This is. So,
I don't know. When I go to a church, I like a big steeple, a nice big bell, an organ. It's the same thing, by the way. It's exactly what churches have done for centuries. The bigger the edifice, the more you figure God must be here.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Leo, you realize that if I don't move my hand exactly in a certain way, I will get letters of condemnation saying that I've destroyed
during the mass.
Right. It's just that's what happens. Yep.
Wow.
I mean, you talk about people who want things a certain way and the same way that it has always been, quote unquote, always been. Yeah, my institution's actually a very good
There's a
example
church in San Francisco that I used to go to on Christmas Eve because they still did the Latin Mass. And I happen to like it. And I don't like this vernacular. What is this vernacular that everybody uses? I asked when I started Twit, I told Patrick Norton, my old friend from the Screensavers, that I didn't want to work for the man anymore. And he said, Leo, let me tell you something. There's always a man.
That's right.
And I think that was a very valuable lesson. He was absolutely right. Let's take actually before we I did want to talk a little bit more about finance in the realm of income inequality, because one of the things COVID has really brought forward is a problem in this country. I think it's somewhat of a problem globally, a problem of income inequality. The fact that the rich are absolutely getting richer, and you're starting to see people get nervous about companies like Amazon and Apple reaching $3 trillion in market value, and sensing that there's, even though that's been our capitalistic goal, that there's something a little bit obscene about people becoming that wealthy. And of course, when people are that wealthy, and then there are people, as there are in San Francisco, who are living on the streets because they can't afford housing, you really start to see that inequality. What does Future Today Institute have to say about that? Is that something you think about?
We do. So, we look at what we would call 11 sources of macro change, and wealth distribution is a big one. So anytime we're looking at the future of any science or tech, we're always looking at it through these different lenses. And yeah, listen, we got a problem. It's too big of a stretch between the highest and the lowest brackets, and it probably didn't help a lot that
it's getting worse.
It's getting worse, and it didn't help that Jeff Bezos was I don't know what he was doing over the holidays, but those photos, if you haven't seen them, that
he was playing Pitbull.
He was. I don't know if any of you have watched Succession. I don't think this is spoiling anything, but it feels very much like Bezos is in the realm of Kendall right now.
Absolutely.
It's pretty bad. So Listen, the characteristics that tended to build and drive civilizations over long periods of time tend to kill us. There's lots of examples of this, and in part that's because there's we create these incentives for what's working to sort of preserve that with the promise that everybody will benefit at some point, and it's probably time that we reevaluate whether or not our current systems make sense, because ultimately, if you wind up with too big of a gap, you don't just have moral and ethical problems. We're going to wind up with lots of. It's unsustainable, which means that democracy is unsustainable. Right. Which means that your future happiness, if you happen to live in the United States, is unsustainable. So,
and it's accelerating. As of the start of October. Let's see if I can remember this correctly. Those who make over $500,000 a year would be considered in the top 1%, and the top 1% of the United States now own 27% of all the assets of the United States. The next 60%, so the middle class, own 26.6%. So the top 1% now own more than the next 60%.
Yeah.
That is completely unsustainable. And if you looked at the chart, it's actually accelerating. So it feeds on itself as that wealth is consolidated. It means that when you go through times of economic depression like we are right now, the only ones who are able to take advantage of it are the ones who have liquid wealth, those who can buy distressed assets. So they're going to buy more and more and more, and the gap will get more pronounced. Eventually, it's societal collapse. I mean, if all of the wealth is concentrated in the top 1 to 3%, there is nothing left.
Yeah, and if you look again, like if you extrapolate that out, in what other circumstance would we be okay with that concentration? Like if you're managing your own financial portfolio, you're not going to just put everything into 2 stocks. There's the math doesn't work out on that. Although
if I could buy stock in Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, I might.
Yeah.
Do you hear what Elon Musk did at CVS? Padre, were you in the tunnel by any chance?
Oh my God! The CES.
I actively avoided the tunnel.
So the Boring Company bored a tunnel under Las Vegas. They put 90 Teslas down there, and apparently there was a massive traffic jam.
The tunnel wasn't even big enough for people. I'm not sure how permits got pulled, because you couldn't even. There wasn't enough egress. Like if somebody had to get out.
Yeah, if there had been a fire under there, it would have been a nightmare.
Right.
There. Somebody put a video up. I can't remember who of them. Let me see if this is this is Mick Lowe's tweet. You can
while you're doing that,
see what it's like.
This is just alternative
this
features.
This should scare the hell out of you.
Oh God.
There's no exits. There's no second tunnel that you could escape to. If anything goes wrong, you are under Las Vegas in a Tesla.
And there was a big pileup, right? There was like some kind of crazy.
Well, it was just a traffic jam. It wasn't. There were no accidents. But it sounds like.
I mean, I've driven through a tunnel before. That was not really a big draw for me.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But it does beg the question: why do we make fun of? People make fun of the Hyperloop. They make fun of Boring Company. Why? Because it just challenges an existing mental model that we're all really comfortable with. Just like, hey, what happens if we distributed wealth slightly differently? I've been working on a digital dividend project that actually relies on Web3 tech. It's just a different model, but people are very uncomfortable having to break their mental models to imagine an alternative or many alternative futures. And we would be in such a better place if we were willing to explore something that is slightly outside of what we're used to. I mean, as humanity.
Yeah, I do wonder if we're buying into a vision that we don't necessarily share because it looks so, I don't know, sexy.
You mean the tunnel or the Hyperloop? Or?
No, I'm talking about Jeff Bezos's yacht. Actually, here's the here's the picture. Jeff Bezos as Pitbull in the middle of the ocean.
The mirrored heart sunglasses are what really made it over the top. I appreciate that somehow he got super buff, and maybe he's using synthetic biology. I don't know. So like the pants, the shirt.
He actually has a trainer who lives with him. That's
wonderful.
How he looks so good.
I mean, these people realize that we're getting very close to the let them eat cake part of
We
the
are
program.
there, I would submit. Yes. This is very much Marie Antoinette celebrating 2022.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Okay, so Leo, wait a minute. This is super important. Can you zoom in on her hand?
There's some
So
Photoshop going on here, isn't there?
There's two things. There's
Yeah.
Photoshop, and
Yeah.
for eagle-eyed people who are used to looking at a lot of celebrity photos like I am, that woman's wearing a ring. She's got a ring on that finger. That's her left finger.
Oh, you think they're engaged now?
I don't know, but she's got weird tiny baby fingers on top of a giant hand with a ring.
There is some Photoshop activity
there
of
is-
some kind.
there is-
In fact,
there
it
is
looks like
some.
there's too many hands on her butt. So
I
I
know.
don't.
That's uncanny valley here. I don't know what
That is Gattaca. That is the piano player in Gattaca, is what that is.
Yeah. Okay. Baby hands. There's definitely. You're right. Now I'm really perturbed. Plus,
you can't
the
unsee
disco
that.
ball is in the pool. I know it doesn't belong in the pool. There's something going on here. All right, let's take a little break. We were talking about the dystopian future. We didn't even get to the issue, the environmental issues of crypto and DeFi. Although I've seen charts that say, well, you should see the environmental cost of the traditional banking system as well. We'll get to the environment
even
next.
close.
It's not
It's
even
not
close.
even close.
We'll get to the environment next. And a lot more. Deep fakes, artificial neurons, AI optimized manufacturing, bioprinted food. This is Amy's list. There's also really good news. There's the James Webb Telescope. What a miracle of technology. I mean, that's kind of mind-boggling. And that, in a way, in a sense, really is the amazing disconnect about living in the future. We are living in an amazing future in so many ways and a dystopian future in so many other ways. And it's difficult, to say the least. Let's take a little bit of a break. You know what I like about the future? Linux. That's what I like about the future. And if you want to run a server, don't run it yourself. That's what Moxie said. Nobody wants to run their own server. You need Linode. Whether you're developing a personal project, managing larger workloads, you deserve simple, affordable, accessible cloud computing solutions, and they are on point. They're amazing. With Linode, you can build applications using a simple cloud manager, the API. You can even do command line if you're totally tough, totally a boss. Quickly scale up or down with standard VMs, dedicated CPUs, and enterprise-grade GPUs. Linode's come a long way, baby. I started using Linode years ago when they first started. Still love it. Still have my Linode account. You'll get a support experience way above the rest. People choose Linode. By the way, I'm saying it Linode. You know what I'm talking about, right? Linode. They love it because, of course, the customer support experience is great. By geeks, for geeks. Linode's independence and mission drive them to a different standard where the customer is the driving force behind everything they do. You're going to love the pricing. Pay as you go. It's predictable. It's transparent. There's never any surprises. I think they pioneered this, actually, the predictable flat pricing model for cloud computing. And you go and you look at some of these other guys and you don't know what you're going to be paying because there's so many different tiers. And not at Linode. No more anxiety over hidden costs. They make it as simple as it can be to launch and scale in the cloud. With Linode, you'll get flat pricing across every global data center. Yeah, by the way, they are fully global. They are fully, state of the art. I am so thrilled with how well Linode has done. They've got a great intuitive cloud manager. They've got the best API in the business. Documentation is incredible. All you have to do if you want to know how to do something in Linode, just Google, how do you do that in Linode? And there's pages and pages of there's YouTube videos. And of course, there's always that award-winning support to back it up. Linode makes it easy to manage your applications in the cloud. And their infrastructure has just gone full bore. They are reliable enterprise-grade infrastructure, 11 data centers worldwide. They've got all the peering relationships you'd expect. They've been around forever. Their next-generation network, Linode, delivers the most modern infrastructure and performance you need, and you can innovate at scale and at the price you'll love. Whatever you want to do, host a website, build an app, store or backup media, launch and enrich your developer applications, your hosted services, your websites, AI, machine learning, gaming services. You need a custom CI/CD environment, put it on Linode. Launch and scale on the cloud with their virtual machines. You could choose shared and dedicated compute instances. And we're going to even give you $100 in credit you could use on S3 compatible object storage or managed Kubernetes or more. G2 Crowd in 2021 rated Linode the easiest to use. Cloud developers love Linode. They choose it because they can make managing complex cloud infrastructure easy with simple bundled pricing, a full-featured API, and 100% human support. Linode pioneered cloud computing back in 2003. That's when I first signed up with them. That was 3 years before AWS. But I got to point out, they're not the old guys. They have really kept up. They are state-of-the-art. Develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier. They're the best. And we're going to get you started with a $100 credit when you go to linode.com/twit. LINODE. No gotchas, no surprises. They're the best. Linode.com/twit. Highly, highly recommended. Really glad to have them on the show. Amy, you made a great list of the future. What else should we talk about in this new world disorder?
Well, you talked about space, and I think
Space is
a good
exciting.
one.
Let's do a good thing. Yeah, let's do something we can be positive about.
Right. So the space web, the James Webb Telescope.
Yes.
So
He's
yesterday,
not Uncle James to you?
not Uncle James,
Uncle
no.
Jimmy's
Sadly,
telescope? No. Oh.
No. I actually remember seeing a replica of it at South by probably 10 years ago or something.
They've been working on this. John showed me a picture.
25 years.
Yeah, that was 20 years ago, John. That picture of them recruiting at Cal State, L.A. Big sign. Come join us so NASA, join NASA. You can help us build the James Webb Space Telescope. So this is 25 years they've been working on this.
It's 25 years. They were, part of the problem was that they were kind of inventing the technology as they were going. It is difficult to underscore why this is such a big deal. And, today cosmology, I took 2 cosmology classes in college and I got so overwhelmed. I actually had a panic attack. It was one of the first panic attacks I had. I didn't know what was happening
yet. Space is big. It's really big.
I passed out. Yep. And I had an amazing professor who I loved, but he was going through all the math, and realizing how big the known universe was and where our place was in it, I got so overwhelmed that I completely blacked out. And it turns out I was not the first person to pass out in one of his classes.
How interesting. Wow.
But so cosmologists think that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old. And what the James Webb Telescope is going to help us understand is what happened about 100 million years basically after the Big Bang.
Yeah, just a couple 100 million years afterwards. So, I mean, all these questions.
Where did light come from?
Yeah.
Where did energy come from? My husband is obsessed. My husband, Brian, is obsessed with this. And every night he checks that he's like obsessively checking. There's a great website that they made so you can track exactly what's happening in real time.
This is Where is Webb?
Yeah. That's a great website. Every night, he gives me a download before we're laying in bed and we're falling asleep, and I start getting all sick to my stomach,
honey,
thinking about the possibilities.
Okay, we are now
the wrong reaction.
We are now 75% to Lagrange 2. We have so the good news is fully deployed. There are still, I think, 47 checkpoints left, but hundreds have been completed without error, which was the real concern. I mean, this deployment was incredibly complex.
It was very
incredibly complex. But they've got the sun shield open fully and fully tensioned. They've got the mirror open.
So one of the cool parts of this technology, if you look again, it'll tell you what temperature it is on different sides. So on the side that's facing the sun, it's like very, very, very hot. Yeah, it shows it right there. It's 131 degrees. And on the side that's shielded, it's like Kelvin, like 2. It's like super, super cold. And so the physics of getting those two temperature states to exist on the same device at the same time without it cracking. I mean, it's completely mind-blowing, the technology that went into building this thing.
Yeah.
It bends my mind. I can't think about it. I don't even want to talk about it. I mean, I want to talk about it.
And what I think is also mind-bending is the information we're going to gain. Not just looking back into the distant past of the galaxy or the universe, but also looking for exoplanets. It was only about 20 years ago that we finally proved that there were planets outside of our solar system. Now we're able to look for rocky planets, a planet you could stand on that might have air. This is mind-boggling.
That's why the near and mid infrared instruments are so important on the James Webb, because the really, really old objects that are moving away at incredible speeds, they're all redshifted to an incredible degree. You cannot see them. This thing is, 100 times more sensitive than any instrument that we've ever had in that range, which means that you can detect rocky planets. You can detect dust rings.
Wow.
You can detect things that, we don't even know what's going to be there yet. That's the part for me that's so exciting. Yes, Hubble was able to catalog an amazing amount of objects in the cosmos. What Webb can give us is a different understanding of what actually can exist in the cosmos, which, I mean, again, I'm with Amy on this. It really boggles the mind when you start to think of the types of knowledge that this can open to humankind.
I love it that your cosmology class made you faint.
I did.
I just love that. That's awesome.
There's another small piece. I had a huge crush on my professor too.
Okay.
And
so your blood pressure was already elevated.
It was, and I was like super humiliated that I blacked out, drooled, fell off of my whole thing.
Are you kidding? He loved it. Are you kidding? That is such an affirmation of his life choices.
I did talk to him afterwards, and he was like, listen, if cosmology is like something you were thinking about, I don't think it's going to be for you.
It's like if you faint when you see blood, you don't want to be a surgeon. If you faint when you see the vastness of the cosmos, you probably don't want to be a cosmologist.
I will tell you it. This is part of the reason why I love The Expanse so much. So the book series and also the show is so, the physics are right, like the science is very good, but there's something profound about where we are and what our place is. And I know people are making fun of Bezos for his phallic-shaped, ridiculously looking,
Well, that's really, I mean, honestly, the race from the billionaires to get to,
Right. So I get that. I totally get it. I know that there's like a billionaire cowboy race right now to send. It's like that most hyper masculine thing that can happen, right? I'm going to send my giant penis shaped thing up into space faster than your giant penis shaped thing. But here's why I think all of this matters. I am privileged. We are privileged to be at the origin of humanity's next story. I mean, 500 years from now, people are going to look back at this moment in time as the time that this started. 6 months from now, as my husband says, our reality is going to be different because the James Webb, that telescope is going to start sending back data that is going to literally change our understanding of reality as we start spending, there are multiple projects going up to space. The ISS only has a couple years of funding left on it. So there's going to have to be either more funding or something else. And geopolitically, I think more funding is going to be rough going forward. So Amazon, among many other, or not Amazon, Blue Origin, among many other companies are building private space stations. And we are making it easier to get back and forth. I mean, if you've watched The Expanse, this is the beginning. It's us. We're the ones alive today. And if you to wrap your head around that, it's so completely profound. I think it makes me, again, I feel this great sense of awe and nausea, at the same time.
Can I bring you down to earth though? In The Watchmen, and speaking of comic books and movies.
One of my favorites.
I know you consider it one of the great works of fiction. I know you've told me that, and it's why I read it, because of you. Ozymandias, in order to bring the world together, because it's about to blow itself up with a nuclear war, fakes an invasion of an alien octopus on New York City, and it works. The world gets together. I feel like we are at that critical junction where we are about to destroy our world and about to destroy ourselves. Do you think, I know there's no Ozymandias to launch a mechanical octopus at us, but do you think maybe James Webb will give us some enough perspective to start thinking more? Because we can't just say, oh, we're going to go to Mars. It's fine. Destroy the planet. We can't do that.
Yeah. So, and also my thinking on getting to Mars is like, we could just change our biochemistry through synthetic biology and create.
Oh, you are an optimist.
Necessary. So anyhow, there's that. Listen, I
can
love
hook you up with
the
some
Watchmen.
proto-molecule if you'd like.
If they don't resolve this proto-molecule situation in season 6, I'm going to be real pissed off.
Okay.
And
Spoiler,
also,
they're probably not going to, because they're going to be going to movies.
it's not. Right. I know.
Yeah.
It would be nice if they just flicked at it more than the stupid. We're going to spoil it, so I'll stop talking.
Right.
No
I actually do like that, though, because that is an example of, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. It is what life is.
Right, but you were asking about what is it going to take for us to
come together and fix
to come
things.
together. So, I really the reason why I love The Watchmen is because there's a part of me that identifies with Dr. Manhattan. There's also a part of me that identifies with Doctor Strange, which I guess makes sense if you're like in the Marvel universe because of foresight. But Dr. Manhattan is, he almost gives up at some point, right? Because
he does give up. He moves to the moon or something. Yeah,
right. Because we have multiple times dealt with. We're living through a catastrophic scenario right now. COVID is a catastrophic scenario that you would have thought would have.
We should have known better. We should be better prepared.
Right. The outcome has not been kumbaya, we're all going to get together and help each other out. The outcome has been politics and school boards. Like, we're inventing new ways to catastrophize.
Screw ourselves up. Yep.
And screw ourselves up. Right. So I would actually be interested to hear the Padres' thoughts on when we start getting data back from the telescope. Do you think that's going to shift people's perspectives? Do you think that they will feel a greater sense of something, anything?
I would like them to. I think there's going to be people like yourself and like myself and like Leo who will invite people to see the beauty in the data that's coming back, in the knowledge that we now have of the cosmos that we did not have before. I think there's going to be some phenomenal changes to our understanding of what we can and cannot reach. There's going to be some theorems about how the universe is expanding that is it's going to blow our minds and could actually make us appreciate more the little ball of dirt and water that we're living on right now. But unfortunately, we have an unresolved scenario in mankind, not just the United States, but around the planet, of a fundamental distrust of basically everything. And I don't see a way to fix that yet. And it's not going to be fixed with the James Webb Telescope. It can inspire, but as many people as are going to be inspired by the data coming back, there are going to be those who think that either it's of no consequence or, and I would not have said this 5 years ago, we're going to believe that all of this is just fake. I used to laugh at that thinking, but that's real now. I mean, we actually have to live with a large percentage of the population of the planet who will not believe anything that they cannot touch. And for them, space is the ultimate thing that you cannot touch. This is no longer not believing in the moon landing. This is not believing in data that could, if you actually looked at it, change how you believe your place in the cosmos is. And I mean, as much of an optimist as I am by profession and by nature, I am not optimistic about those people changing their minds.
Yeah, that's why I get irritated when I listen to people like Chris Dixon, or I listen to, basically in every conversation, we're talking about decentralization, DeFi, AI, pick your favorite acronym, CRISPR. We wind up in these binaries, right? So you've got utopias and you've got dystopias, and by and large, in the 18th and 19th century, all of those proto-futurists and sci-fi writers, everything was about utopian societies. even eugenics, which is something they wrote quite a bit about, was always about utopias. And then we flipped. In the 21st century, 20th century, it was dystopia. So AI equals robot overlords taking our jobs and then murdering us in our sleep, environmental collapse. And we've got to shift away from binaries, and that shift cannot be into disbelief, right? Which is exactly what you're talking about. It's like we either have utopia or dystopia, or the middle ground is misinformation. And like that's an incredibly short-sighted, not to mention dangerous viewpoint. And I think, again, we're shutting ourselves off to uncertainty and discovery, and we have to make some room for that. But I think that there's something.
Life is gray. Life is not black or white.
Yeah, and I think this is like an American characteristics. I don't see this happening in other countries, especially not in places like Japan. We need to have certainty, otherwise somehow we're threatened. And the people that I've always found to be the most generative and humble, but also productive, and the people who matter most in society are those who are okay with uncertainty.
I agree.
And
I agree.
You know what I mean? And they're like willing to investigate and change their thinking over time.
I'm going to bring up a very sensitive and difficult subject. And Robert, this is in no way an attack on you or your faith. But I do think that hyper extreme religiosity in this world, not just this country, but in this world, has become an issue. And
yes,
and that in fact that kind of reactionary thinking is problematic. But I'll give you a chance to convince me.
Actually,
otherwise.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there is something that we talk about a lot in spirituality. That I think actually can help the conversation. When you actually have a spirituality that is healthy, when you have a spirituality that leads you to be a better person rather than a more cynical or just mad person, you have a spirituality that opens you up to the potential of being fooled. Now, let me explain what that means. It doesn't mean, oh, yes, I'm going to believe everything. It means that you are willing to make leaps of faith that may prove to be wrong, and you have to accept that you may be wrong.
Aren't we taught, though, that faith is what makes this all possible? That you have to make a leap of faith?
No, see, that's the other side. The other side of the faith cookie is those who see faith as something that says, I will never be fooled. You will never pull the wool over my eyes. Therefore, I will never have to make a leap of faith because I already know everything. That's the side of faith that is so dark and damaging. And unfortunately, that's what Amy was talking about. That's that hyper partisanness of, I'm not going to believe you because I will never be fooled. If you are not willing to make that faith leap, if you're not willing to be fooled some of the time and to later on admit when you've been fooled, then you will never expand your understanding of the world in which you live. You will always be in your nice, cozy little culvert. Yeah.
This was my big problem with the reboot of the Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but was started by, help me out, the Family Guy creator, Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah.
MacFarlane.
Right. My big problem.
Wait a minute. Seth MacFarlane did the reboot?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I think he single-handedly funded it, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And my big problem with that was that it wasn't, I mean, and let's, this came out at the height of the sort of Trump era when there was a lot of disparagement of science. But the problem was that there was so much overt atheism, almost sort of as its own form of religion, like a religious adherence to atheism, that also closes off the door to curiosity and exploration. It makes no sense, right? And it in some ways diminishes the whole point. If the point of the exploring the cosmos is to gain a better understanding and to expand how we think, then shutting, sort of forcing everybody to shut off their curiosity, to me, is just as bad as a hyper-religious person, telling everybody that they're wrong if they're not true believers.
Yeah.
None of that makes any sense. It's never made any sense.
Dogmatism of any kind is a dead end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say that. Although I'll stand up for atheism as an atheist, but
Listen, I think people who have been listening to the show for a long time, I'm Jewish, right? I was raised Jewish. There's a horrible thing I could say about how other people would qualify me as being Jewish. I'm not going to do that because that's very not PC. But I've never really felt a belief, but it doesn't mean that I'm closed off to be exploring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know, but like how it's the certainty that bothers me. The certainty that it's you either are a true believer or you are a true denier. And I feel like, especially because of what I do for a living, we should always be leaning into alternative possibilities.
Yeah, well, I'll accept fully that I don't know. That's kind of absolute. I mean, the more you know, the more you realize, the less you know. But at the same time, I do feel like religious faith has started to become a problem in this world. And I think actually the way you've described, and I don't mean merely a Christian faith, religious extremism of all kinds is a problem.
Religious extremism is a problem in Judaism. I mean, there's a whole
absolutely.
bunch of
That's why I'm saying it's not
Orthodox.
It's not
that
exclusive.
are not.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's super ultra Orthodox Jews that don't believe in vaccinations and have been attending like 10,000 person funerals. I mean, like, how irresponsible could you be? You know, so it's a problem. It's a problem because when you don't leave, when you adhere to certainty and you leave no room for uncertainty, then you are going to have problems. Because what would it take for your certainty to be absolute? You would literally have to be Dr. Manhattan. You would have to have and you would have to be a supercomputer. You'd have to have complete comprehensive knowledge of all data all the time as they are unfolding in real time. And you would have to have a superhuman capability of computing all of those data all of the time in order to be certain. You know, the humble thing to do is to recognize that we ourselves can never have access to all data all of the time. And there's no way to compute all of those data anyways, because things are continuously changing, right? Math is the logic of certainty. Statistics is the logic of uncertainty. And if you think about life in terms of statistical probabilities rather than mathematical absolutes, you get through life a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think.
Humility is a good word, I think, in this. Let's take a little break. You guys are so good, and we didn't even get to CES. Can we do one segment on CES, Robert?
Sure, that sounds fun. We could cover like the 2 or 3 things that were actually fun from CES.
Yeah. But I love these deep conversations, and I think the future is a great topic, so we'll get more. And we have 2 excellent people to do this. Father Robert Balasaire, the digital Jesuit, who is on leave from the Vatican, gets to be with us a little bit. I think it's interesting because I think the Jesuits are in many ways the least dogmatic of the members of the Catholic Church.
We've got a range. We've got some dogmatic Jesuits, but our history is to question.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we do.
And as far as I know, the order is unique in that it embraces evolution. Yes.
Oh, that actually the church does.
The church does now.
The church does. The Catholic Church does.
Wow.
Yeah, but most people don't realize that.
No, I did not know that. And the Earth is round, as it turns out. So,
it's round and it goes around the sun.
Wow. Yeah, there have been people burned at the stake over less. All right.
Yes.
Also with us, Amy Webb, whose eyes are cast into the future, but is firmly grounded right here with us. And I'm so glad to have her. And by the way, yes, Professor Muffson was very, very cute. It was a cute.
Oh my God, if he's kind of like my type. I'm into like older bald men. It's always been my thing. I don't know why. I'm sure I've got us deeply.
I did briefly shave my head, but I'll never be bald. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, he's kind of hot.
It's great to have you both. Our show today brought to you, speaking of money, by Wealthfront. Now we've been talking. It's interesting. We talked earlier about how once you get your financial security settled, it's time to start looking to more interesting investments. But I really want you to focus on building your wealth in a sane way first. And that's where Wealthfront is so great. It's not day trading. It's not watching the stock market day in, day out. It's not buying GameStop or AMC because somebody on Reddit told you it's the right thing to do. I see a lot of ads these days for investment apps that make, oh, it's easy to start trading. There's one that says, oh, I take my advice from social media. Yeah, I'm not sure that's the... Just because it's easy doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Wealthfront makes it easy to invest and easy to grow your savings, but it does it with a diversified portfolio that balances your other riskier bets. You can start investing in no time with Wealthfront's classic portfolio, or make it your own with things that you care about. You still can buy things like socially responsible funds. They've got an amazing, by the way, socially responsible portfolio. Technology. Do you want to invest in crypto trusts? You can do that as well. There's hundreds of other investments. But the point is, Wealthfront was designed by financial experts to help you build your wealth in a solid, sane way, to turn your good ideas into great investments without having to do it all yourself. Rebalancing your portfolio. Experts always say, you got to rebalance, you got to rebalance. You got a lot of equities, you're over heavy in equities, you got to look at other investments. Wealthfront does that automatically. You don't even have to know what rebalancing is. You're doing it. Wealthfront is so successful, they're trusted with over $28 billion in assets. It's easy to get started, $500, but it's all about building your savings for your future, whether it's retirement, buying that house, college education for your kids. Grow your wealth the easy way. Let Wealthfront do the work for you. So simple, so powerful. 4.9 out of 5 stars in the Apple App Store. That's a good sign, right? Yeah, it's easy to use. Yeah, it's effective. Start building your wealth. Get your first $5,000 managed free for life. That is excellent. Go to wealthfront.com/twit. Wealthfront, WEALTHFRONT, wealthfront.com/twit. Start building your wealth. Go to wealthfront.com/twit to get started today. We thank Wealthfront for supporting This Week in Tech, and thank you for supporting us by using that address, by the way. Wealthfront.com/twit. CES determined not to shut down one more time, but only, what did you say, Father Robert? A quarter of the normal people, about 40,000 instead of the usual 170,000 showed up because fear of COVID. A lot of companies, some of the biggest companies said, yeah, we're not going to go. There were still plenty of keynotes, some of them done by Zoom. There was stuff to see. Were all the halls full of exhibitors?
They were not. They were most definitely not. My favorite is the Central Hall. So if you're not familiar with CES, the Central Hall is where all the big players go. That's your Sony. That's your Microsoft.
That's where all the
Google.
TVs are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All the blinky shiny ones. I think the best representation of CES 2022 was where the LG booth should have been. It is a premium spot. As you walk into the hall, you have to pass by LG.
Yes, they had that video waterfall last year or 2 years ago.
Right. And the tunnel. They always do something.
The tunnel.
They had nothing.
Nothing.
It was literally, the space was empty. It had some signage, and it had QR codes, so you could go there and scan it, and it would show you what would be there.
Oh my gosh!
Did they make were these decisions like last minute, and so they didn't have a way to reconfigure the space, or what happened?
Absolutely, yeah. So CES put out a press release. They said, "Look, we've lost 40 or 50 vendors, but we brought on 200." Well, the 200, they were basically saying, we'll give you a booth. Just come and do something. We'll give you a booth. There were a lot of booths that actually still had like the opening desk and the starter paper there the entire show. So they gave it to someone and they didn't show up. That happened quite a bit. Now, that's not to say that it was a ghost town. I actually had some of the best conversations at this CES than I've ever had, because there wasn't that constant crush of people. There wasn't that need to move huge amounts of people through your booth. So I had some great technical discussions with the people at BMW and with some of the people from the greater UK technical group down in the startup pavilion. It was actually nice. I don't think we're ever going to have a CES like this again, so I'm kind of glad I went.
Yeah. And the one reason to go to a CES, especially, is for TVs, to look at things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to understand in a press release. You can get all the tech specs and so forth. But for instance, this LG OLED throne, you never, if you don't get to sit in it, you probably don't appreciate the, did you get to sit in it?
No. I actually, there were two things that I think were the standout visual wise.
Yeah.
The standouts of CES. One of them was outside. It was BMW. BMW had their
The
e-ink card.
color-changing vehicle.
Yeah, it was an ebook. Interesting. It was fun. I love Gonzo technology. I sat there and I took 5 minutes of footage because it is so compelling. Very impractical. But then again, that's one of the things that I enjoy about CES. I want impractical tech. I remember seeing demonstrations of the self-driving cars 15 years ago.
Yeah.
This is the sort of stuff that it doesn't look practical right now, but you will find a practical way to
This
put it
is
into
kind
mass
of what
production.
bothers me about CES is there's a lot of non-starters. There's a lot of, kind of sci-fi that it isn't.
I get it. Yeah.
But that's what I mean. That's what the World's Fair used to be, or the great expo.
Right.
So maybe I should think of it as a World's Fair and not a trade show.
Well, no, not anymore. I mean, the last time I went to CES, I've been a couple times in the past 15 years, but in the early days, it was what mattered was the meetings in the rooms.
Yeah.
They still
People.
had booth babes, so there have been some.
CES has changed. It's gone through several iterations. So when it started, it was just a place for retailers to find out what they were going to stock for the holiday season. That was it.
Yeah.
That was the whole reason for the conference to exist. Then it became, well, let's show you some of the crazy stuff. We're going to show you a prototype for a flying car. We're going to show you the prototype for a nuclear-powered washing machine. Completely impractical, would never, ever make it out there. But it was nice for a young geek to say, wow, I wonder if I could actually make that. Could I make that in a practical way? Then the iPhone came, and I will say, for 3 years there, CES became iPhone accessory show.
Yeah.
And it was the worst years ever. And now it's kind of a mix. Yes, you've got a lot of those meetings where people are deciding what they're going to stock, but you're also getting a little bit more of the, hey, we pushed the tech to where we think it could be in 10 years. We have no plans to manufacture this in the near future, but do you like it? And I kind of like that mix.
Yeah. So tell us some of the things you, besides the color shifting car, they're not going to make that as a real product, are they?
No, I mean, they're probably going to include little bits and pieces.
You could have it
but
on the
doing an
bumper or
entire
something.
car, an entire car, no, it would be too expensive and too easy to break. There was something down in the startup pavilion. It was from the Greater UK Tech Foundation. Basically, they did a pavilion for the UK, and the spokesperson for this group was this robot that they had created that was using machine learning to answer people. Now, it sounds cheesy, and when I first heard about it,
It sounds so cheesy. It sounds like
it's so cheesy.
exactly the stuff that I hated. CES.
When I was filming it, I was like, yeah, okay, so this is basically, this is an Alexa with a robot face.
Yeah.
But then I went behind the robot and I filmed it. And I saw people interacting with the robot, and I realized, oh my God, there's something actually here. People were enjoying having actual conversations with something that was not alive. And,
So it was a robot.
Yes,
What did it look like?
there was an actual robot with a. And
It was very
my
West.
laptop
I have
was
a
connected.
picture right here. It's a Westworld, basically.
Okay.
Right.
So-
But it actually engaged people. People were actually enthusiastic about talking to the robot, asking it questions, seeing what kind of responses it would come back with. That was probably the most successful demo at CES. I think it was way beyond what they thought they were going to get.
I think the problem with that for me is that in 1938, the Westinghouse Electric Corporation had Motoman. Now, to be fair, Motoman was not an AI. It was using telephone relays, but it smoked. It even smoked.
Right.
But so it's been a really, really long time.
This is
and
just
we've
creepy.
got
And it's not really, I mean, this isn't going to be doing my dishes anytime soon, right? I mean,
Right.
Yeah, this is more of a.
But that's why it's also not Uncanny Valley.
Yeah.
Because they didn't try to make it human. It's obviously synthetic. But they were able to sort of, they were able to
It does make
get
you think about
responses from
what is human and what is it that, we look at this and you really very quickly anthropomorphize it and say, oh, yeah, I see feelings. And
it is anthropomorphic. We don't have to anthropomorphize it. It
Correct.
looks
It is.
like a person.
They're doing it on purpose. Yeah.
But I think it's worth noting that, almost 80 years ago, a similar robot existed at a similar conference.
Yeah.
But now, if you want what was actually useful from CES, and not even a question, it was all the biotech. And Abbott was the standout. 100%. So they're the ones who make the rats, the rapid antigen tests, and they were handing those things out.
Thank
like
God
candy.
they don't make rats. Okay.
No, but their other tech, they created a device that it looks for markers in the blood that are released when there is a concussive brain injury. And now they've created a handheld device that you put a drop of blood into a cartridge, and it can detect if a person has had a concussive brain injury
before.
Well, I know. And that's what I said. I said, you understand there's shades of Theranos here. They said, yeah, but this is actually FDA approved.
Okay.
This actually works.
Okay.
They also have a deep brain stimulation device. It's worn like a pacemaker, and anyone who's suffering from Parkinson's can now have relief. They've also made a patch that does real-time monitoring of everything from glucose levels to blood chemistry.
Keto. It's doing ketosis. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is actually technology that I was like, if you gave this to me, I would actually use it. I would find it useful. This is not future tech.
Clearly seen this as one of the Apple looks like they're looking really hard at AR, at cars, and at health. And they've already got a product that is, kind of their entree into the health world, which is the Apple Watch. And it's very clear they're looking to this as one of the next big ways for them to make money, a multi-billion-dollar industry. Of course, number one would be blood sugar, non-invasive blood sugar measurements. There's 14 million diabetics in the United States who would all immediately buy an Apple Watch if it could give them their blood sugar without a prick. So, Amy, let's talk about that. Health, is that the next big thing?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of drivers for why health tech is accelerating. One is there's a big component with AI. So AI for predictive analytics and
you kind of need AI to make this work because the signals are so weak. You need something that can be trained so that it will recognize those signals.
Right. So that's happening. The other thing that's happening is the quantified self movement that, was sort of coming and going in fits and starts. And the
people like that, though. Every athlete I know wears a Fitbit or a Apple
They do
Watch.
now.
Yeah.
They do now. But I think if you were to go back 15 years at CES when quantified self was kind of everybody was talking about it, it never happened. But the technology and the price points have, sort of aligned. So you've got younger people interested in optimizing everything from sleep to, endurance and everything else. And then you've got an aging population that is affluent enough and tech literate enough to want to invest in devices.
Yeah, we knew the
And on top
boomers
of
would
that-
kind of move the needle as we have our entire lives. We're a giant market, and now we're aging. Yeah.
And you've got COVID, which has shifted everybody into thinking more about health and diagnostics. So it's kind of a perfect storm. Last year, I think it was, or 2 years ago at CES, the smart toilet launched, which was research that Stanford started in 2010. I mean, it's like putting a bunch of sensors in the one place that you really
Poop
don't want
analytics are, as disgusting as that sounds, clearly could be a very big health benefit.
Right.
Didn't
So I
they
think
use it at the University of North Carolina? They used it for dorms so they could detect where there was COVID-19.
Well, in fact, we know they're analyzing sewage and effluent to find COVID viruses in populations, and it's been a very good indicator.
And there's startups that are there's a company in England that for a while was before we were constantly getting our noses swabbed. This was a voluntary spit into a tube at a grocery store, where you could get your DNA tested, and then they would give you a wristband that would glow different colors and help you shop. Basically, it was like DNA based.
That is weird.
So that is weird, and it's not a one-off. So my point is,
I know a lot of people who have done these tests that say this is how you should eat. 23andMe was even offering that kind of information.
Right, and if you talk
genetically,
to
this is what you should be eating. I don't know if it's snake oil or real.
It's if you talk to any geneticist, they'll tell you this is a little bit like a horoscope.
Yeah.
You can use it for entertainment purposes, but don't base your
horoscope.
Any decisions.
There was an episode of Farscape where they used a sort of a DNA test to determine who you would be compatible with in relationships.
Yeah,
So
there's actually a DNA.
maybe we could get a
based
glow band for
dating.
that.
We
No,
already
there's a
have,
dating-
by the way, we already have that system. It's in the nose, and it's very effective. There's a lot of, you're laughing, but there's a lot of evidence that genetically your best match, battery's exhausted, by the way. Your battery's exhausted, Father Robert.
I have exhausted my battery.
It's time,
I wasn't
time to
plugged
put your
in.
battery to bed.
That's a problem.
But there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of evidence that your best genetic match is somebody who smells good to you. That your nose is already doing that, and it wouldn't be surprising if it makes sense from an evolutionary point of view.
Right. I mean, I think the thing is how do you monetize all that? And so part of the
Isn't
reason
that
why,
a shame that that's always the metric?
well, again, look at where do you grow? Apple's making phones and computers, and there's a lot of our models show that the phone is going to be dead in a couple of years. I know it's hard to wrap your head around.
Just like
So
Father Robert, it's exhausted. Yeah.
I am completely exhausted.
So health is so big and so broken that I think companies are seeing a viable opportunity to disrupt in the sort of
Yes.
Clayton Christensen
course they
innovator's dilemma.
That's,
right?
I think, part
all
of the
this makes-
problem. That's part of the problem in this country is we don't do it unless you can make money at it. It's one of the reasons we have very expensive pharmaceuticals in place of simple solutions that no one can patent, that we do high-tech medicine, but we don't do low-tech medicine. And I think there's a lot of evidence that outcomes could be better if there were perhaps, better relationships between doctors and patients instead of better machinery between them. In a way, doesn't that desire to make it profitable mislead us somewhat?
Right. So this, as far as I'm concerned, is the tragedy of the free market.
Yes.
The free market, the free market is like algorithmic determinism, right? If left to its own devices, it will continue to soldier on.
Perfect
whether or not
analogy.
that's
Perfect
right. Whether
analogy.
that's good for everybody.
Yes.
So there is a balance, but again, it forces a different mental model. And at the moment, you're either libertarian or you're Republican or you're a strict interpretationist. Everybody needs a label. If we could dispense with the labels and get on with the business of creating better equity for everybody, I think we'd be in a better spot.
Yeah, and I understand you need capital to do some of these more expensive things.
Right. So the antidote to that is just like throwing a shit ton of money at basic research. We see other governments doing this. We see China
That's
doing
who
a lot
needs
of
to
this.
do it. Government is, in theory, not motivated by profit. Government is, in theory, motivated by societal outcome.
Right. And I would argue that is and I'm in a very high, I'm in a very privileged place, which means but I'm not wealthy enough to not pay taxes. So I'm just in that bracket that's paying time.
Isn't that the worst? You make a lot of money, but you're not wealthy enough not
But I'm
to
not
pay
wealthy
taxes.
enough.
Yeah, it's just the
Exactly.
worst. Yeah, I agree.
So take my money and please throw it at science. And it doesn't mean that the government does everything, but it means we need to have better public-private partnerships. It also means that government has to be held
I'm with you 100%.
accountable. Part of the reason why this James Webb Telescope took so long to launch was because it was funding, and it was working at the typical pace of government, which is probably not right for everybody going forward.
Right. And yet I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to be in charge of our space exploration either.
I don't want Zuck or Elon Musk or Bezos to be in charge, but I want some of the freedom and the speed that comes with the free, with private
Elon has
enterprise.
done an awful lot to forward our space program all by himself.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, not all by
there's
himself.
no other way to.
He had a few thousand engineers and scientists working with him, but he's been
Right. And I think Bezos.
Yeah.
I think Bezos gets a lot of shit for many reasons, some of which are very legitimate. But he has also, it's not just Musk building the future with SpaceX. There's a lot of other things that are happening.
That's right.
But the bottom line is we can't outsource the future of space to the commercial sector because the incentives there are tied to profit. But,
do you think we have
design.
maybe this is a roadmap for the way we should handle this? It seems like, at least in space, we've had a pretty good balance between commercial space and government, and it's done, I think, a pretty good job. Is this now a new model for medicine and other areas?
Well, it certainly did when we were still in the business of defining and acting on moonshots. You know, there's no Kennedy, and I'm not like a
only
JFK.
government could do that. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
But we don't have we don't have a. I mean, this is part of the problem. There's so much policy uncertainty. We don't have the ability to plan for the next 10 years in the United States because we don't have a department of foresight. So what happens is a lot of this becomes politicized or just left to the private sector. And then they build, and then a bunch of people get upset. You know, there is an alternative. Let me give you one quick example. Dubai. So I did not go to CES, but I did go to the World's Fair.
Did you really?
It's called
Expo 2020?
It
held
was
in 2021? Yeah.
Yes, it was absolutely mind-blowing to me. And there's nothing there science-wise that's very interesting. And the USA Pavilion, for many reasons, was which I helped advise on. I think for what it was okay, but our lack of planning meant that it was not as good as it could have been.
Isn't that ironic?
Oh my God. It's not. It's like totally on point for the United States.
Yeah,
right
we
now.
would have had a better pavilion, but the dog ate our homework and
many things.
Yeah.
But they built a city in the middle of a desert. I mean, it is just absolutely
that's Dubai,
spectacular.
isn't it? I mean, that's what's amazing about Dubai.
Now, one of the things that they are doing that we are not doing is that they're trying to figure out what is the future of drone. So the UAE and Dubai specifically were like, what is the future of drones for delivery, for people transportation, for pets and objects? What does that look like? But while the technology is developing, they also have like a beta lab for policy. So they've got people working alongside the technologists to figure out, okay, well, what should policy look like in response? Or what does urban planning look like while the technology is developing? And it's a really interesting synergy. It's like a totally unique and different approach that we might adopt here if there wasn't such a wedge between the Valley and DC.
All right, I want to take a little break, and I do want to go right into the heart of your expertise. Amy's next book is all about the biotech revolution. I've pre-ordered it. I'm very excited. I can't wait to get it. It comes out February 15th. Let's talk about biotech. You know, a lot of science is being done in space. That's great. But we kind of need to solve some problems here on planet Earth. So let's see what that future holds in just a bit. Amy Webb is here from the Future Today Institute. Father Robert Balasare from the Middle Ages. Do you not have another battery, Father Robert?
Well, unfortunately, no. But I do have this camera from like 1940. I think this
work.
might actually
That'll work. That's hysterical. Yeah, you forgot to plug it in.
I did not. I forgot to plug in the power. I had the HDMI plugged in, but not the power.
That's so funny. That's so funny. All right, but before we let's pause for a minute. Lots more future to talk about. Before we do that, though, let's talk about the past. What happened this week on Twit? There's this guy named Jeff Jarvis. He thinks this emoji is a whistling emoji, when everybody knows it's a kissing emoji.
I only yesterday I learned I've been using this incredibly inappropriately, as it turns out.
Wow. Seriously?
You've been sending people kisses.
Previously on Twit, hands-on photography.
I am going to answer a question that I get just about every single day. Which camera should I buy?
The tech guy.
QD OLED or quantum dot OLED. The benefits are many, including greater brightness, much greater brightness. Because
this has always been an area OLEDs have lagged behind LEDs and LCDs, is that they're just not as bright. Does this solve that?
Yes, it does.
This Week in Google.
Regular people who don't spend their days thinking about law, thinking about tech, you know, they have political will. This is a democracy. They can choose the laws that regulate them. So how do you educate them so they can ask for good things? Then when they call their members of Congress, they will ask for things that are actually more useful than just do something, burn it all down. What do I care? I hear Section 230 is bad. You might as well get rid of it. And how dare you not?
Twit, making the world safe for technology.
Let's take a little break. Father Robert Balasare from the Middle Ages, Amy Webb from the future. I'm stuck right here in the present. Our show today brought to you by BetterHelp. After listening to this show, you might need some better help. BetterHelp is a licensed therapist you can consult with online without any of the stigma, without any of the embarrassment, for a better cost, and it really works. And I can tell you that from personal experience. If something's preventing you from achieving your goals, if something's interfering with your happiness, if you've just got, and I think we all do these days, a leaden feeling in the pit of your stomach, BetterHelp is here. BetterHelp.com/twit. They'll match you with your own licensed professional therapist. One of the things I really liked about it, I've always been a believer that you've got to find the right therapist. BetterHelp makes it very easy to try therapists and to move on with no downside to find the person you want. A good friend of mine went through, I think, 3 or 4 therapists before this person found exactly the right person, and BetterHelp made that easy. You'll connect in a safe, private, online environment. If you don't want to use video, you don't have to. You can have a weekly phone session. It's not a crisis line. I want to make that clear. Nor is it self-help. It's professional counseling with licensed therapists done securely online. You can send a message to your counselor anytime. You'll get timely, thoughtful responses. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. Again, you don't have to be on camera. You don't have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. You don't have to, nobody need know that you're doing this. And I know for some people they're embarrassed. I should say you shouldn't be embarrassed. This is really, I'm such a supporter of this. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches. They make it easy and free to change counselors if you need to. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling. They even have financial aid. It is available worldwide. I love that too. And you can find the particular expertise you need online because they've got counselors in all areas. You don't have to limit yourself to what's available in your location. You can, in other words, you can get a licensed professional who's an expert in depression or stress or anxiety, relationships, family conflicts. Boy, I needed that last month. Sleeping, trauma, anger. I have a good personal friend whose sleep has been terrible. Counseling has made such a difference. LGBTQ matters. Grief. Don't suffer alone. If you're in grief right now, don't suffer alone. There's somebody there who can really help. Self-esteem. And of course, anything you share, confidential. It's very convenient. It's very professional. And it's really affordable. There's plenty of testimonials on the website. You can look there. I will give you a testimonial. It really works. In fact, so many people now are using BetterHelp, they're actually recruiting additional counselors. This is an idea whose time is very timely. All 50 states, they're looking for therapists. So if you're a licensed counselor, contact them as well. But look, I don't know how I can emphasize this. This is something that really works, that will make a difference in your life. If you've resisted talking to a professional about these issues ever before, now's the time to do it. It's easy. Join over 1 million people who've taken charge of their mental health. And as a listener, you're going to get 10% off your first month just by going to betterhelp.com/twit. Betterhelp.com/twit. Time to take charge of your mental health. And the thing is, this works. It really works. It can really help. You will feel better. BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/twit. Help is on the way. BetterHelp.com/twit. These are really, really good people that do a very good job. It's a very important job. All right, Amy Webb, your new book coming out in just a few weeks. Are you excited?
I am. Please pre-order it.
I did.
For legit reasons. There's a paper shortage, and so
good Lord, even paper?
Yeah, their supply chain is all screwed up paper right now. So my publisher has ordered. They've assured me enough books, but when my last book came out, The Big Nine, they ran out. A lot of bookstores ran out of books. So anyway,
and this is really such a hot topic. This is going to be a bestseller. I think people really want to know about. It's not just CRISPR. It's not just mRNA vaccines. There is stuff going on in biotech that I think is going to be as significant as James Webb, if not more so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually think it's the most important technology of our lifetimes, and I was so intrigued by it that I wrote a book on it.
You know what? You know who else thinks this is going to be that important? Bill Gates. I remember even this was 20 years ago. Bill would always take these vacations, these long vacations, where he would read up on something. And even then, he said, the next big thing is biotech, and I need to be an expert in this. And
very few people know this, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Please, go ahead.
Well, very few people know this, but Microsoft is actually a big player in this space.
Yeah.
Microsoft is trying to figure out how to store data inside of DNA.
I knew this because Esther Dyson would go with him on these trips, and she told me, yeah, we brought all of these books. We did all of this reading. And yeah, Bill Gates has been personally an investor at Microsoft also. It's a very exciting time. What do you see as the big developments that are going to happen and make a difference in our lives in the next decade or so?
Yeah. So first of all, it's kind of a weird term. So synthetic biology is a relatively new interdisciplinary field of science. So if you've got an engineering background, you're going to recognize parts of what you do in this form of wetware. If you've worked in AI, in design, in circuit board creation, there's a huge overlap. So basically, researchers design or they redesign organisms at a molecular level to give them new purposes or to enhance them. And this really does change everything because, in a way, to make an analogy to like coding, it gives us right access to life. So
why is it synthetic as opposed? What does that mean, synthetic biology?
So it's a good question. So we're obviously using ACTG, so atomic organic building
Anybody
blocks.
who loves the movie Gattaca knows that those are the key amino acids.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes. So that part's not synthetic. The part is the reason we call it synthetic biology is because it's synthesizing code for new purposes. So it's sort of sequencing and synthesizing. So when Watson and Crick, who totally stole and used the work of Rosalind Franklin without ever giving her any credit, and then Watson, who was like awful, disparaged her publicly when they built their first.
Such a tragedy.
It really is.
Yeah,
He's
horrible.
So they sort of built the first model. Revealed the first model of DNA, and that gave others the ability to read our biological source code. So that's like read permissions. Edit permissions would be CRISPR. So this is limited ability to splice and move around ACTG. That gives us sort of a edit level permission. You can hook up a special protein to a guide RNA, and that gets you to the right part of the cell and moves along the DNA strand until it finds the right sequence.
It sounds like it's very much influenced by computer technology, by digital technology.
It totally is.
Yeah.
It totally is. And so synthetic biology literally is like, it gives us the ability to write new code. So if you're a developer, you might invent new machine learning algos or a new protocol, but you're in a way like still sort of fundamentally tethered to the architecture of whatever, the platform and the systems logic. Which means at the end, you're still working in ones and zeros. So it's kind of the same in biology. You're still, in the end, using ACTG code. But if biology is the fundamental technology platform, then this gives us the ability to write, almost like you would write in a Word document or like, Terminal or so, like pick your favorite program, right? And you would be able to write what you want, literally send it to a printer.
It sounds like science fiction, but we actually... mRNA vaccines are one of the outcomes of this.
That's absolutely right. And this research has been, 10 years, it's going on 10 years. But it was a way of applying, they sequenced the genetic code of the virus in a very short amount of time.
Over a weekend.
Right. So
Jesus.
So it's really remarkable, but it's also not at all remarkable that we got these vaccines so fast, and they would have been in the market faster, except for
we had to test them.
We had to test them, and supply chain.
Yeah.
So, but basically,
Amy,
what this means
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I know that synthetic biology basically allows you to repurpose organisms. by editing long stretches of DNA versus, say, genetic editing, which would be much smaller sequences. How close is this to being able to not repurpose an organism, but to create an organism?
Yeah, well, that's already happened. So a guy named Craig Ventnor.
This is scary.
So there are some sort of figureheads in this field that are heroes of mine, and Craig Ventnor is one of them. And
Ventnor was the guy who sequenced the genome.
So Watson was leading a program at the government, doing it old school and basically completely unwilling to look at any new techniques or tools. Ventnor is this like surfer guy, ready to like thumb his nose at any, like higher order government thing, comes up with a totally different way to do it. And then there's a great movie to be made about the race to complete to uncover the human genome. At any rate, they've already created a synthetic organism from scratch.
What?
And it's the first ever, there's a bacterium, and it's the first ever organism that has ever existed. It's a living thing that technically had computers as parents. And it is self-replicating.
Oh, now see, this plays right into everybody's science fiction terror.
So this is why I'm obsessed with the protomolecule. Right?
Should we be worried?
It is
Yeah,
a
we should.
protomolecule.
It totally freaking is. And if you've read the books,
She's
that
talking about The
is
Expanse, and it's not a spoiler because it's really at the very beginning of the Expanse.
It is,
story.
and then sadly,
it's the disease that is the problem. But okay, go ahead. And it's
a self-propagating organism that the challenge is that biology. The interesting thing is that pretty soon. Actually, now we're going to be able to. We can program biological structures as though they were tiny computers, right? That's this concept made me go down all these rabbit holes, which is how I wound up writing the book.
So read the book, but I have to say that we have governmentally in the past, and as a society globally, deprecated certain kinds of research because we were, for instance, cloning. Remember the scientist in China who said, I edited a gene and was able to eliminate, I can't remember which disease.
Yeah, it was AIDS. And I will tell you that in retrospect, he was basing a lot of his research on genetic enhancement. So one of the offshoots of that, like the knock-on
But that's one of the things we've decided globally not to do.
Well, you can proclaim something globally, but then practice very different things.
Well, he got disappeared by the Chinese government after doing it.
Yeah.
When it becomes so easy to edit a genetic sequence as it currently is,
you can't keep a lid on this. So that's why I'm afraid.
You no longer need state resources to be able to do something like this.
Yeah.
Right. So so one of the things that we do in the book is there's nine significant risks, and one of the things that we wrote these. So I keep saying we. I wrote this with a friend who's a microbiologist who's done a ton of work in the space, and
Andrew Hessel.
Andrew Hessel. So we developed some scenarios. Again, it's what if, right? We're trying to figure out, what are possible outcomes. One of those outcomes, I was trying to figure out. So obviously, there's like the lab leak theory and messenger RNA. At around the same time that was starting to bubble up on social media, there's an academic paper published showing a lot of the sequencing. So the sequencing happens in your local country, but the synthesis, which is to say the printing out of stuff and sending it back, a lot of that's happening in China. And there was a team of Israeli researchers that were like, I wonder if there's a way for us to inject malware into genetic code and to obscure it so that you can't detect in the transmission that anything has happened, but you would send totally innocuous code to somebody in China and get back not an innocuous sample, but something that's potentially virulent. And they were able to do that. And so what that made me think of was, what happens if like that actually happens in a lab? Who do you go, like who's in charge? So I started calling my friends at the State Department and DOD and Homeland Security. I'm calling everybody. I'm like, hey, if this actually, I wrote this crazy scenario. If this actually happened, what then? And the answer is nobody knows because we are totally unprepared for a cyber biological attack. And it is totally plausible that something like that could happen. And by the way, you don't have to have a virus that kills millions of people for it to be horrific. You could invent a virus for one person. Donald Trump had a terrible security team. They left behind all kinds of garbage. In fact, there was an artist collective that collected a bunch of his stuff.
Including his
auctioned,
DNA, presumably, yes.
Right, and others who were at WEF one year, I think, and put it up on a website like, hey, if you want to buy these people, like, here's a fork, you can take Donald Trump's
God.
DNA. Right. So if I had that,
But wait a minute. The very fact that the Secret Service should be sequestering anything with the president's DNA on it is a terrifying idea.
Sure. Well, but it's. Again, we need to change our mental models because
is this legitimately now a possible?
This is right now. Listen, I could potentially engineer something that doesn't have to kill somebody, but it could debilitate them enough. Maybe they've got chronic diarrhea. If you've got a CEO with chronic diarrhea, suddenly you have fiduciary responsibility to tell your shareholders. And if not, that potentially runs afoul of, like the new corporate espionage could be totally ransomware of your gut. That's absolutely right. That's what I'm talking about. So there's a ton of opportunity on the horizon, but as with every technology, there's dual risk. It doesn't mean we don't use it. I mean, there's a great quote in Aben. Yeah.
We've crypt blocked your hearing. If you'd like it back, please send 50 Bitcoin to the following address. Oh my goodness, this is terrible.
Quote?
Yeah, I mean,
what's the quote? Tell us what the quote is.
So it's a James S.A. Corey, who's like the pen name of Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, who wrote the series. So I'm going to read it.
We're back
it
to
killed
the
humans.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's my obsession. It killed humans, therefore it was a weapon. But radiation killed humans, and a medical X-ray machine wasn't intended as a weapon.
Right.
Right. So I mean, this is biology. We are manipulating it. We've got right access to humanity's source code, and we're going to do great things. You won't need e-ink in the future to change the color of your car. We'll be able to create a new type of
change the color of your skin.
Material. Sure. Did the diabetes comment earlier? There's actually work underway to turn your skin into its own pharmacy. So you'll be able to detect when you're having a sugar episode and automatically solve it. We may not need insulin in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
But there's all kinds of horrific risk on the horizon. And at the moment, we don't really have a plan. As we never have a plan.
Well, what would
right?
be the plan? It doesn't sound like there is any. I mean, government could try to make it outlaw. Certainly, people were fighting against GMOs, probably incorrectly, but we're fighting against GMOs.
Yeah.
If they hated GMOs, you're going to really hate this.
Right. So one of the big risks, and by the way, there is a whole chapter just on the plan, and the plan is going to require licensing and a bunch of other things. You have to have a driver's license to drive a car. You don't have to have a license to operate synthetic biology. Is probably a mistake.
I feel like this is going to be very hard to control, though, because there is so much. I mean,
but it's already out there.
For instance, we were not able to control the manufacture of an atomic bomb, which was a difficult thing to do. We did our best, but there was so much espionage going on and there was secrets being sold that eventually the secret leaked out. And proliferation of atomic weapons has historically been a concern. This is far worse. Is it as hard as making an atomic bomb?
No, because one of the first experiments was, no, not at all, was sequencing the polio virus. I mean, somebody created smallpox in a lab just to show that they could create smallpox. I don't think that there was some kind of intentional lab leak, okay, with this virus. I don't think that.
No.
I do, however, think there's a strong possibility that this is the result of something called gain-of-function research, which is when scientists sort of mutate the hell out of something in order to see how bad it could get.
This was a way of preparing for worse viruses by...
But we don't need to...
We don't need to do that. I agree. That's probably a bad idea.
Like 20 years ago, maybe. But DeepMind has cracked one of science's most thorny questions, like being able to figure out computationally what proteins look like. We have powerful AI tools that, we're never going to be absolute, but we can run simulations to see what probable mutations.
So, Father Robert,
like.
I've decided I am no longer an atheist. I would like to come to you and request absolution. I think we're in a world of hurt. Is there?
This is the future of the Catholic Church. We are going to store original genomes so that when people screw up their own DNA with editing, we can revert you back.
Yeah.
We're basically cloud backups for genetics.
Yeah, I want to reset, please. This is terrifying future you're just describing, Amy.
But it's also inevitable.
Terrifying, but it's inevitable.
I think it's inevitable. I think it's almost impossible to control. I think there will be great benefits from it, but I do fear that they will be outweighed by the diarrhea gene.
It doesn't have to be. We're facing existential threats.
No
We've got
kidding.
a climate emergency. COP26 ended without alignment. Again, is there something we can do besides reducing carbon emissions? Absolutely. You could create artificial leaves. You could re-engineer strains of yeast. You could do all kinds of things. Is there... if we're going to live on Mars, right now, given our current genetic makeup, it's improbable that we're going to survive. So can we re-engineer ourselves for off-planet living? The answer is obviously yes. We have fertility issues. We've got emerging health issues. I mean, we have a global food insecurity crisis. So this technology, this biotechnology, synthetic biology, helps with all of that. But we have, once again, funding that is starting to spiral out of control, and people, once VCs start throwing money around, the end result is usually not good. We've got IP problems. We have people who believe in scientists, but they do not believe in science, which is a problem. We've got misinformation, and we have the threat of the escalation of biowarfare. So, but we have some time, we just have to make
it doesn't sound like we have a lot of time.
We don't have a ton of time.
And I think, honestly, COVID has been a dress rehearsal for our complete ineptitude. I don't think... I
agree.
Are you a pessimist or are you an optimist in this?
I'm a futurist, which means that I'm emotionally detached most of the time.
I think I'm going to go watch The Expanse. Pretend none of
you still haven't watched. You promised me you were going to watch it last time, Leo.
It's so good. Watch it with subtitles. That first series. I will tell you, of all the books that I've written, people are like, "Oh my gosh, have you become an optimist overnight? You seem like this seems so uplifting."
This doesn't seem uplifting at all to me. This seems like a terrifying dystopia that we are heading pell-mell into.
Well, it's here. So now's the time to get educated.
And all we've done is demonstrate the complete, utter incompetence of government to control anything like this.
Yeah.
That's been clear. We can't even get COVID under control. That's nothing compared to the things you're describing.
There's a difference, though.
What's the difference?
There's an economic factor to this. This is an arms war. If you start having large organizations that are doing wholesale genetic manipulation and genetic sequence editing, it becomes a huge advantage as far as economies are concerned. And once you have that, you do get the power of the state behind it.
Is China...
And again,
where is China with this, Amy? I know you follow this closely. I presume
China,
they're all over this.
They very much are. China has put part of its sovereign wealth fund towards synthetic biology. It sees, and it's I started really paying attention to this while I was working on my last book about the futures of AI. So it's part of their 14th five-year plan and their long-term strategic roadmap. I will say this because I know this sounds, and I can get pretty dark pretty fast. Part of why I'm very hopeful about this, and I open the book with this, is that I had a whole bunch of miscarriages. I tried and failed to start a family, and it was any man, woman, anybody who's been through this knows how horrific it is, or if you've got somebody in your life who's been through it.
Yep.
We've left creating new life up to complete chance. And science gives us an out. It gives us optionality. And rather than wondering what was wrong with me, because medically there was nothing wrong with me, this would have given me an alternative. My mother died of a horrible death. It was a super rare form of cancer that they couldn't figure out. I've got another friend who's had childhood diabetes his entire life. It's managed well, but it's, he's walking a different path than everybody else is. And my point is that as scary as some of this sounds, there's enormous hope for all of us on the horizon. It gives us optionality to improve our everyday lives, and not just us. I mean, this makes medicine cheaper. If insulin goes away, think of how many people, people are there's a gray market for insulin on Facebook because it's so expensive, which is ridiculous. So we started today talking about decentralization. For me, the great promise of synthetic biology is that it decentralizes in some way. I mean, in the truest sense of the term, access to some of these tools, which is a good thing, but we have to go forward with a sort of measured and very, sort of pragmatic outlook on all of this.
It is at the level where somebody could be doing this in a garage, though, right?
It absolutely is. There's something called iGEM. If you've got kids in high school or college, they can actually start doing this. There's elementary school kids can get involved, which is not the worst thing, right? If we think of this as being the next evolution of engineering. Okay, but why do we are not science literate. This is a huge problem.
No.
It is, right? So I am all for helping people get more literate, but again, there's always going to be fringe cases. There's a crazy guy who's biohacking himself at every turn. And
we've interviewed him. I know the guy. Yeah.
So
the book, Genesis Machine, Our Quest to Rewrite Life in the Age of Synthetic Biology. Now I have to read it. And then, Father Robert, I'll be over for confession later today. Holy cow.
We'll welcome you with open arms.
Holy cow.
We've got a guest room for you, so yeah.
It's enough to make someone turn to religion.
Well, 50 years from now, they're going to look back at this time in our history, and they're going to say, can you believe that people used to leave their progeny to chance?
Yeah.
They used to leave the next generation to a genetic...
I'd feel better about that if I trusted people's choices more. Honestly, I think maybe nature had a better way of doing it. But you know what? We're headed headlong into the future. And I can't imagine two people I'd rather go down that road with than these two right here. Amy, you've given us so much food for thought. FutureTodayInstitute.com. If you are a business person, a CEO, or if you work for the government and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on, this is the person to talk to. Future Today Institute. We do need a little more strategic planning in our life. I think we do. Let's do it right this time. Father Robert Balacer, thank you for joining us. Thank you for going to CES so we didn't have to. I appreciate it. Did you get your battery back?
Negative.
It looks like the camera got better again.
It's slightly back. I basically had to plug in a portable battery bank, which is actually not enough, but hopefully it'll last long enough.
We'll let you go before you get exhausted again.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great conversation. I thank you both so much for being here. Just fascinating stuff. I think so much that we need to do more of this. We had originally scheduled some others who were not able to make it this week. Maybe we'll do this again with the people who we also wanted, as well as you guys, because I think there's so much more to talk about. We didn't get to all of it by any means. Amy, thank you for setting the table, though, and what an amazing, amazing conversation. Thank you, Amy Webb.
Thank you for letting me go completely off the rails as usual.
Awesome.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. And yes, I'll watch The Expanse, okay?
Thank you.
I keep trying.
You need to.
I lose track. Maybe I'll read the books instead. Maybe I'll
also read the books. The books are tracking almost
the
exactly.
books are actually fantastic.
Yeah, I think I'll do the books instead. There's just something about it. I just have a hard time engaging with it on TV. So maybe it's the books. Thank you, Robert. Come visit us as soon as it's safe. We'd love to see you again.
I'll be back in 6 months or so.
Yeah. Thanks so much to our fabulous audience for being here and listening to all this. It's been a wild show. We do Twit every Sunday afternoon. It's always different. It's always interesting. It's one of the reasons I like it. We have a rotating group of panelists, and so it's always a different subject. But I think this was really great. If you want to watch it live, around 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern, 22:30 UTC, just go to live.twit.tv. If you're watching live, it'd be great to chat live. Our chat room is wide open. Amy was in there, which was great. And I know Father Robert frequently goes in there. irc.twit.tv. And I will turn on the subtitles. Amy says, turn on the subtitles if you watch The Expanse. That's my new go-to for everything. Thanks also to all the folks in our Discord server. If you're not a member of Club Twit, you really ought to join. It's $7 a month. What do you get? You get ad-free versions of all the shows. You get access to the Discord where conversations like this happen all the time. You also get the Twit Plus feed, and there's content that we do that does not make it out into the podcasts, but exists only for Club Twit members. For instance, Stacey Higginbotham's book club, they're reading right now Autonomous by Annalee Newitz, which covers almost all of these subjects. It's a sci-fi work, but it's very much in this arena. It's a great book. It's a really good book, and Annalee's great. We interviewed her.
She's a terrific writer.
Yeah. All about robots and all kinds of stuff, autonomous AI. If you are interested, just go to twit.tv/clubtwit. There's the Untitled Linux show. There's the Giz Fizz. There is the book club. We've got interviews. Andy Anako will be the Ask Me Anything subject this coming week. And all of that's yours for a mere $7 a month. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit to find out more. After the fact, everything we do is always available for free. No membership required. It's ad-supported, of course. You can find the show at twit.tv, our website. There's a YouTube channel. Every show has its own YouTube channel. And, of course, the best way to get it, probably subscribe in your favorite podcast player, and that way you'll get it automatically. You don't even have to think about it. It just downloads, and you'll have it for a Monday morning commute if you so desire. If your podcast player allows for reviews, do me a favor. You know, this is the longest-running tech show podcast out there, 15 years now and more. And so as a result, we don't get on the charts anymore or anything like that because, you know, we're just old timers. But a review would help. A 5-star review would really help us get the word out. Hard to believe there are people who still don't know that Twit exists. But there are people I firmly believe who would enjoy this show who don't know about it. Spread the word. That helps us out a lot. Thank you all for being here. Stay safe. We'll be back next week. Another Twit is in the can.